Now we're in the fifth and final installment of the story of the 5 American missionaries who went to reach Indians in South America, the Auca Indians, with the gospel. It's Friday the 6th of January and a real breakthrough had happened. 3 Auca Indians had appeared on the beach. Jim walked over to them and he's shouting. He's in the middle of the river because they're on the beach on the other side, and he's shouting, "Puanani, Puanani," which means in their language, welcome, welcome. An older and a younger woman crossed onto Palm Beach along with a man. Now they nicknamed the man called George, and they talked with them throughout that day, and they shared a lot of simple things with them, showing them elastic bands and a Time magazine, and they even had a hamburger. Imagine what they thought of that. And they shared these things with them, and they tried to communicate with them over this day's period. George was even given a flight in the plane, and as he flew over his village, he shouted with delight to his fellow Indians down in the village below. Suddenly, 2 of them left, and the older woman stayed and talked into the night, but in the morning she was gone. But these young men, the 5 of them, thanked God for the contact they had made with the Auca Indians. The following day, Saturday, was quite disappointing. They received no further contact. They waited all day. No visitors came at all. That evening, Nate and Peter gathered up all the film footage and all the photographs they'd taken the previous day, and they flew back to the base camp where they had come from. The next day, which was Sunday, the 8th of January, as the plane landed, they had some exciting news. They radioed back to their wives back at base. They said, "We've spotted some Auca Indians approaching us. Looks like they'll be here in the early afternoon. We will contact you next at 4:30. Sadly, the Auca Indian savages were not there to show or reciprocate any kindness or love. As Jim waded out into the river to welcome them, a wooden spear screamed through the air and thumped into his body. And Jim and the other 5 missionaries died suddenly in a frenzy of violence. The 9 Auca warriors who had come attacked from the bushes and cut short the lives of those 5 young men. Jim, Nate, Peter, Roger and Ed all had guns. They had taken guns with them, but they'd made a commitment that they would not use their guns in self-defense because they believed that the souls of these men and women were more valuable than them losing their lives, because they knew if they died, they would go to heaven because they were trusting in the Lord Jesus Christ for salvation. In the aftermath, the bodies of these 5 young men lay strewn across the beach, and one of them in the river, and their lives were gone. At 4:30, Marge turned on the radio. One of their wives turned on the radio, but there was no message. And they thought maybe it was just a problem with the radio, with communication. And so they waited and they prayed. And it said that they waited for 5 days and they got a calm and a peace from God, despite their fear and worry and uncertainty about what had happened. A search helicopter was eventually sent over the site, and the pilot reported that Nate's plane was on the beach, in the middle of the beach, but there was no sign of those men because by this stage their bodies were not to be seen. And so the United States and Ecuadorian authorities sent out military aircraft, and eventually they sent in some people along with a reporter called Cornel Capa from Life magazine to take pictures, and they found eventually the bodies of these 5 young men. Many would have seen the death of these 5 missionaries as an absolute waste of life. They'd everything to live for: lovely wives, beautiful children, prospects, talents. But these young men believed that the lives of men and women were more valuable than their own lives. They believed that they needed to reach out with this life-changing message. And today, as we live in a world where people are dying because of COVID-19, we have to understand there's life after this. There's a heaven, that we can have forgiveness and peace with God, and that's the most valuable thing we can ever have. The amazing end or additional part to this story is that the story didn't end there. Dayuma you may remember her, went back to her tribe eventually 2 years later and shared with them how she had become a Christian. The Auca Indians invited the wives of those missionaries, Elizabeth Elliot being one of them, to come with her young daughter Valerie and to tell them about God. And one of the most amazing stories is one of the men, Mincaye, who had been the man who had actually taken the life of Macaulay and Nate Saint, became a Christian. And Nate Saint's son, Steve Saint, came eventually to live, and this man adopted him as his tribal son and heir. And that Auca Indian tribe eventually was won to Jesus Christ and became Christians, and they still are today. A sad story with a happy ending, where people's lives were changed through coming to know Jesus Christ.